In this video, I'll be sharing with you guys how I understand colors by breaking down colors into their individual elements.
That the entirety of the cosmos is accessible to each and every individual's mind, connecting to the great mind, the great spirit.
Welcome back to the channel, collectors. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you guys my system of how I break down colors into their individual elements and how this helps me to understand colors a lot better.
Also in this video, I will show you guys a very useful color mixing exercise where you can try to mix some colors and understand colors for yourself even better.
So my perspective of colors stems from my view of how I see life, and in a way I have a very scientific perspective of how I see and perceive life, and that sort of carries over to my understanding about colors. So for me, I constantly seek to isolate different variables so that we can just tweak the variables of the colors to see the effects and to see how each of these individual variables affect the result of the colors. So in a sense, every color can be broken down into several basic elements. When you break down the colors to these individual elements, it really helps you understand the colors even better, and it sort of creates a framework for you when you are using colors, rather than just remembering what is Evil Sun's color all about. In a sense, what I'm doing is I'm dissecting every single color and understanding the anatomy of the color, so as to not just use colors by recipe, but by understanding why each color is placed in this order, so that we get to understand the color progressions. So my understanding for colors and the individual elements that go into them stems from also my graphic design background. So I'm gonna be using some very basic graphic design terms so that we all get to understand the colors a lot better together. So in a nutshell, every single color has three components that you should remember. Number one, value. Basically how bright or how dark something is. Number two, saturation. In a sense, how intense or how strong a color is. And the third thing is more or less a periphery point. It is the color temperature, how warm or how cold a certain color is. So this is the way how I break down colors. So I'm going to explain more into depth about these 3 points which I just brought up for you guys. First and foremost, value. So we have an understanding value video which I always point out so that you can learn. But in a nutshell, what is value? Value is how bright or how dark something is. Because we are painting miniatures, there's no way we can reflect something that is, in a sense, reflective through non-metallic metal. The best way to show reflective surfaces is to increase the value, increase the brightness by basically using brighter colors. And when using object source lighting, we need to show a point of where the energy is emitting, where the light is being emitted, and that usually stems from the area of highest value. Therefore, value is really important because it influences how we perceive each and every shape and each and every material. Areas with bigger percentages of high value tend to be more glossy because they are more reflective, whereas surfaces which are matte tend to have a lot more mid-tone and a little bit of extreme highlights just to sort of frame the shape. That's about it. One common mistake for value is that it's very often confused with saturation, which is the point that I'm going to talk about next. But then I'm going to share with you guys how these two things converge. So areas with higher value tend to be desaturated. So in a sense, if you can look at my face, the area right here where it's reflecting the most light tends to be closer to white, hence more desaturation, and the area that is not reflecting light as much tends to be a little bit more, well, colorized, so more saturated. However, we cannot mix this up because the area here, while having less saturation, tends to be of a higher value. You can't say that the area here, because it's less saturated too, has a higher value? No. So to understand more about values, what you can do is you can take a black and white picture, and fundamentally that is a value scale. So from a value scale, you can tell where you will need to push the values and where you will need to create more shadows to create the most amazing looking miniature possible. Values also help to educate the viewer of what shape and what form this is. Be it a sphere, be it a cuboid, these things react very differently from one another, hence the need for value. So since I brought up saturation, saturation is the next point that we are going to be discussing. Saturation is the concentration of pigment in a particular color. So in a sense, red versus pink. Red tends to be more saturated because it has more red pigment per volume versus the pink more red pigment rather. So that fundamentally is saturation. But saturation can also be very misleading sometimes. So in a sense, say for example, a yellow color versus a purple color, you would think that the yellow color is always brighter because yellow tends to be able to be saturated while high value, whereas purple can't do as much. However, that is totally false because you can always have a very high value purple. The downside is purple tends to saturate at a lower value, so in a sense, you do not get a very saturated purple, but you still can get it at the same value. So let us do some experiments. So we have two colors right here. One is a very saturated color right here, and the other tends to be a little bit desaturated. But we keep the saturation different. What we can do right now is to desaturate everything, and what you see is two equal grays. So with these two equal grays, it shows that one is more saturated than the other, however the values still can be the same. So there we have it, that was saturation. Now the third component for every single color is color temperature. So color temperature is a little more subtle and requires a bit of finesse. I'm kidding, it's just how warm or how cold color is. So in a general rule of thumb, warmer colors tend to have more orange, right here. Colder colors tend to have more blue, like right here. So that is fundamentally color temperature, warm or cold. Is that right? Wrong. It's actually a little bit more than that. So color temperature is, of course, always relative. By definition, can you have a warm blue? Oh yes, warm blue will exist next to a cold blue, right here. You can see these two colors here. But can you have cold orange? Oh yes, that's two. Cold oranges can exist right here in these two colors here. So right here, what you can see is that the warm orange next to a cold orange makes this orange look a lot more cold. Hence, you can have a cold orange. There we have it. So now that we've spoken about the factors of each color, we can start putting colors in progression. So color progression is important because we've started talking about relationship, putting two colors together and having them have a relationship with each other, warm versus cold. So this can really be seen in, say for example, the white carapace on my Chaos Diamond Major. The base was a cool grey color and then gradually it moved up to a warm white color. This color progression in a sense is moving from a cool slowly to a higher value and to a warm color. This is the color progression I'm talking about. And we can create very complex color progressions while having very simple color schemes. That's how you can use many colors while keeping your color schemes simple. No longer do you have to have bright gaudy colors and in my opinion, complexity within the color is much more tasteful. But of course, this is just my personal opinion. If you want to paint it in your own way, that's fine too. So now with the knowledge of color, we're going to apply some of this knowledge of how we can start to fine-tune colors and how we can use this knowledge for color mixing.
Okay, so we have all the Chimera colors laid out, and right now what we're trying to mix is we're trying to use the Chimera colors to mix Cabalite green. So I'm just going to talk you through the process. So the starting point, of course, is going to be Chimera green. It's going to be some kind of emerald green. I would say that the colors are close enough. However, the saturation is a bit too high and the value is a bit too low. So right now I'm mixing a grey using Chimera white and black to mix the saturation. So I down the saturation and it looks like I'm roughly there, close enough to Cabalite green. So up next, we are going to try to mix Evil Sun Scarlet. At this point of time, we are always thinking about the three factors of colors that we mentioned previously, which is saturation, value, and color temperature. So right here, what we can see off the bat is that saturation of the Chimera red is a lot more saturated, and we need to make this a little bit warmer so that we can match up with the Evil Sun Scarlet. That's why I'm adding in orange from Chimera very gradually. Just gradually adding in orange until I get the correct value and saturation. Okay, so I would say that this is pretty close if you ask me. Up next, we are going to try to mix Temple Guard Blue. This is pretty interesting because this is very different from the base color, and you will see me trying to move towards this as closely as possible. Okay, so I'm using Chimera Blue. This is a Chimera Blue green shade. So quite obviously the saturation and the values are very different. So the values need to be higher. That's why I added a bit more white. And the color temperature is a lot warmer in the Temple Gut Blue. So I added in a little bit of cool yellow. So I would say that this is a little bit too warm. So I added more white in to readjust this. So in this demonstration, I would like to invite you to see my thought process of how I use these three different elements in the color to try to influence and get the color as close as possible so that you can mix each color as close as possible to the base color. So the next color we are going to try here is dark sea green. So I would say dark sea green is a good mix of Chimera green and Chimera blue. You get this bluish green color, which is quite dark and desaturated. So with the pure saturation, I added in black and white, and let's see what it gets. So the value is a bit too high here, so I'm gonna keep adding black in to adjust the saturation and the value so that we get something as close as possible. So now let's try something even more challenging. We're going to try matching up with Games Workshop Avalanche Sunset. Avalanche Sunset is a mustard yellow color, and we're going to try to produce some mustard yellow color using the base hues from Chimera. Okay, so what you will see here is I'm using warm yellow, and I'm going to desaturate this using a little bit of black. So by adding in a little bit of black and a little bit of cool yellow, I'm starting to try to edge this color closer to Avalanche Sunset. So the differences here, what I would say that it is close, but could be better. Okay, now we're going to try to mix Vallejo watercolor orange brown. So I'm going to start off with red oxide, and as you can see, the distance is a bit far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add black and white in to reduce the saturation, and it looks like it's going to be a bit warmer. So I'm going to add in a bit of yellow and oranges to try to mix it towards this orange brown from Vallejo watercolor. And notice that the value is a lot higher too. So I think this itself is a useful exercise that you should try for yourself, because it gives you an opportunity to dissect each color into the different components, and you can try to mix them. And I hope you give this exercise a try for yourself too.
So that was my understanding about color and how you can improve your color understanding and become a better miniature painter. What do you think about videos like this? What other topics would you like me to cover? Just let me know in the comments below, because I find many inspiration and many ideas from the comment section, and your idea just might be picked and I will cover your idea in a video just like this one. At this point of time, I'd like to thank my patrons for allowing me to do this. It's through their generous support I am able to record videos like this and share my knowledge so that we all get to become better miniature painters together. Alright, so head on to the Patreon, become a patron today, and I hope you support the channel. However, if you can't become a patron for any reason, that's okay too. I'd like to appreciate your time for watching all the way to the end. And if you could, please leave me a like and subscribe if you think I deserve it, because this really helps the channel a lot and lets YouTube know that a video like this is relevant for miniature painters like yourself. So I hope to catch you in the next video. See you.